Let's talk to Nick Freeman, who's a lawyer, of course, a man we speak to on many, many occasions about all sorts of things. But this morning, Nick, a very good morning to you. We're talking about e-bikes and yet another incident where a terrible, terrible accident has happened. A 10-year-old boy crashed into by an e-bike rider and then speeding away, literally leaving him for dead. His nose apparently hanging off. Terrible pictures in the papers this morning. His face looks like something out of Phantom of the Opera. I mean, this is getting worse and worse, isn't it?
And it will continue to do so. I mean, this is a horrific incident, and as you and I have said many, many times, an e-bike is the same as a bicycle.
Yeah.
Its maximum speed by power is 15.5 miles an hour. So the trouble is with an e-bike, it weighs over 30 kilos. Many of them are tweaked. There's no means of identifying who's riding them.
Yeah.
So when you have an incident like this, they're not obviously allowed on the pavement. So there's no legislation in place at the moment, effective legislation to deal with it. So even if they got hold of the guy, what would they deal with him? Well, would fine him for riding on the pavement. There's no offence of causing serious injury by due care, as there is for motorists and motorbikes and moped riders. There is no relevant legislation in place. So I suspect this e-bike actually was a moped, and therefore there would be legislation in place, but without some form of identification, a number plate, it's all academic. There's no means of enforcing anything. But as the law currently stands, for bicycles and for e-bikes that haven't been tampered with, there is literally nothing you could do. Fortunately, the boys survived. So what would you do? If you actually detain the culprit, then you would be able to have a civil action against him. You would be able to sue him for compensation, and that would obviously be a massive amount of money. But from a criminal perspective, he's riding on the pavement, and he's riding without reasonable consideration for other road users.
Yeah.
That would attract a very small financial penalty, and that highlights the total paucity of relevant legislation, not just for e-bikes, but for cyclists as well. And you and I know that they really don't want to be legislated for. They don't want to accept responsibility. But it's cases like this that must surely force the government's hand and say, look, time has come now, and it's compatible with an environmentally friendly movement. We all need to assume responsibility, and once we know we can be traced for our actions, we will become responsible, and we won't be cycling on the pavement, we won't be e-biking on the pavement, because we're going to be faced with consequences.
Because it only takes one or two cases, doesn't it, Nick? I mean, most people probably get away with it because they think they can. This guy apparently was riding on the pavement. I mean, this poor little boy, Nadine Ralph, was literally playing outside his house. So he was on the pavement outside of his own house, and yet, you know, he was hit by this guy speeding down the pavement. I presumably didn't see him coming, didn't hear him coming. But I believe that if you just prosecuted 2 or 3 people and gave them a proper punishment, it would all stop tomorrow.
Well, but how do you prosecute them without the law in place?
Yes, I get that. Yeah,
that's the difficulty. Once the law is in place, I'm sure people would change their behaviour. You know, as I've said many times before, you take a number plate off a car or a lorry or a van and see how that driving standard changes. They'll become irresponsible because they think, oh, I can go through red lights. I don't need to do this. I don't need to do that, because the chances are I'm going to get away with it. There are no police on our roads, are there? There are no police on our pavements.
No. Do you suspect, Nick, that there's a sort of ideological reason why nobody wants to talk about this? You know, the sort of clean air brigade who go, oh, no, but we want to encourage, you know, car use to be declined. We want to encourage people to walk and use bikes. So they don't really want to clamp down on this, do they?
No, absolutely. There's a huge resistance to it. But, you know, there was a huge resistance, if you remember, to drivers and passengers wearing seatbelts.
Yes.
But, you know, we've got to balance, haven't we, safety. And we want to encourage this form of transport. There needs to be a safe place. They do not comfortably coexist with pedestrians on the pavement. You know, the new highway code, we have an order of vulnerability, a hierarchy of vulnerability. And you can't have, you know, a speeding 35 kilogram e-bike on a pavement and not expect there to be serious accidents and fatalities, as there have been.
Yeah, absolutely right. Nick, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We can only hope that somebody sees the reasoning why we need to enact proper laws so that people who do this kind of thing can and will be punished.